Kenny here with Gardening Simplified. It's January 13th and we're propagating up some apple trees. So let's get into it here. Now, these cuttings are real fresh, so pretty much I don't need to worry about clipping the ends off or soaking them for a little bit or something like that. But I do want to, I've got them all wrapped, but I want to wrap them with this parafilm. And this parafilm is a film that's used when you're doing grafting and stuff like that. And you want to kind of stretch it and lay it over. And I'm putting it on the top edge because I don't want this moisture to dry out and this cutting die off as it's rooting in. Now, as far as the time, it's hard to say how long it's going to take. Now, a lot of times you can take this film and you can wrap everything that's above the ground. A lot of people will do that. Now, for what I'm going to do for right now, I'm going to put them in a container, like make me a little greenhouse, and then I'll put them in an area. But anyway, we'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, what I've got here is I've got some pink ladies. I took these off of one of my trees. I've got a couple trees, and they're not really in the best location, and they're not really thriving like they should for as old as they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to make me some more. Now, when you start taking cuttings from a fruit tree, there's a lot of factors that play into it. Now, you will get the same fruit, a clone of the mother plant, but you're not going to get a clone of the rootstock. And the rootstock is specific. Maybe it's really hardy. Maybe it's got a lot of disease resistance, maybe nematode resistance, stuff like that. So if you just was to root this cutting, it's hard to say if it would even survive good, because the rootstock is not as good as it could be. Otherwise, they'd be using just growing those straight from cuttings. They wouldn't be grafted. Now, what I've got here is I've got another one of my apple trees that likes to send suckers out from the rootstock, which is a bad thing but a good thing. If you're wanting more trees and you want some good rootstock, then you just take these cuttings off that rootstock and you propagate them up. And so that's what I'm going to do. I have all these are rootstock cuttings. These are pink ladies, and I'm thinking this was Macintosh or something. Another fruit tree I got, it's just one, and it's never done real well. Well, I might have two of them, but neither one have done real well where they're at, because they're too much shade, and it's, as far as one of them is starting to get a place in it that it's probably going to have the top of it taken out anyway. But what we're going to do, we've wrapped all these with parafilm, and we're going to take down here at the bottom. Now, you want some of these nodes to be under the soil. The more the merrier. What I'm using here is just drinking cups. These are 16 ounce. I would have preferred 20, but for some reason none of them have clear 20 ounce around where I'm at. I guess it's the pandemic or something. But anyway, they have holes in the bottom. I made some holes so they can drain. And my mix that I'm using is it's a 50-50 mix of peat moss and perlite. So it should have enough moisture to root, but enough drainage and air that the roots won't, that this bottom won't rot. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this cutting and we're just going to slice down on two sides of it. We're just slicing the skin off. Now I'm using a powdered rooting hormone, and I'm just going to set this on here, let it kind of any juices or something that flows out of it, get it to go ahead and attach that better. And I'm just going to do some more of these. Now I shave it off, so I've got a good area for this thing to root out from. Once it's injured like that, a lot of times, and it's under the soil, it'll go ahead and put roots out, and that's my intent. And I'm just going to do some more of these. And I'll do all these root stalks first. Make sure that they got rooting hormone on them and can sit there and soak a little bit. The rest will be in the hole, but in case some gets pushed off, and it won't hurt if it gets pushed off because it'll be up higher by another node there, leaf node or something. And they say that's normally where it roots because there's a lot of undifferentiated cells there, so they could either make leaves or roots, and so they're that's more likely to root out the more of those you have. And if you ever go back and you look at them, or you look at videos where somebody has been rooting them, you'll see that it's a tendency that there's more roots. And just like shaving the side, you go back and you'll see that there's a lot of roots. Now that we have all those setting, we'll give them a time to soak, and we'll go ahead and trim these others. And like I say, these are pink ladies. I have, and I only took 6 cuttings, and of course, if half of them, I mean 5 cuttings, if half of them root in, then that'll be quite a lot of fruit for me. I've been concentrating on an orchard now because I've tried to grow apple trees, and I have some Honeycrisp, which they say won't grow in 8B, but I happened to get some from a vendor, and they actually do, well, they say they wouldn't produce, but they do produce. My big thing is I don't have enough bees here to pollinate them. They'll flower real good, and they just, you watch them and the bees just don't get them. That's with most of my fruit trees are kind of like that. And then these other ones, occasionally they will, but of course the weather plays a factor too, because when you're sitting around here and it gets hot and cold, and the tree doesn't know when to bloom, or it thinks it's warming up, so it goes to bloom earlier and sets its buds, and then a freeze comes and freezes all of them. You know, that's a sad situation. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to make some holes in our pots here. And we're just going to start sticking these down in here. Now, I'm not worried about putting these in here deep because this is a smaller pot than what I normally pot up in. But I went to these because I'd watched some videos, and it's really easy to see when these start rooting, because you don't have to guess, you don't have to worry that they're not, and especially this smaller one, the roots are going to come to the edge quicker, so I'm going to be able to see them. But once I get those put up in there, what I want to do is make sure that I put a tag on these, because if you don't tag them, you're going to wish you did. I don't know anyone's memory that's all that great that they can remember everything that they do, especially if they've got a big sized garden. I have a hard time even remember which blueberry varieties I have. I have to have something written down somewhere in some kind of cheat sheet, whether it's take a photograph and take and write on it so you know which one's which and can tell where they're at. Or a sheet of paper and draw out something so you can tell where they're at. Once we get all these in their pots, we'll move them into their little mini greenhouse, and that's the ideal way to keep them where your cutting stays moist, because you don't, like I say, you don't want it to dry out. If it dries out and dies, you know, there's so much energy in there, only so much, and if it dries out and dies, then you're not going to have a apple tree. Now, a lot of people would take, now if you notice, I'm doing my rootstock and I'm doing my variety of apples separate. Now, and a lot of people would go ahead and they would go ahead and graft these together. But the thing is, if I have a failure on either one of them, then what I end up doing is losing both the rootstock and the sawing wood that I'm wanting to clone. So the best way is to root them this way, because even if they don't, if it doesn't do well and you end up losing some of them, and say you have your variety that you want to keep, it'll still grow. You can still grow it in a pot and until you get some rootstock, and then you can take cuttings off it. Now I could just grow the rootstock and then wait and grow the cuttings later. And put them to it. That's one way to do it. But like I say, this is just the way I'm gonna do mine. I'm kind of playing with it, trying to get me some more apple trees. See if I can't get something that's going to fruit good. I have grown apple trees from seed, and I have some in my garden. If you look back in my garden updates, they're not quite 2 years old, but they've really taken off. In fact, I had to trim them back. You know, they were up about 10 foot and good and hardy. But the thing about that is when you grow from seed, you have that taproot that's there from the tree. Now, these won't be true to variety. They won't have a rootstock that's proven disease resistant. You know, I can only hope that they'll do good. But they grow so much faster whenever they have that taproot, and when they're grown from seed, it's just amazing. But anyway, let's get these moved over into their little mini greenhouse. If we want to call this a mini greenhouse, I'm going to call it a storage tub. You can pick these up at Walmart or some other favorite store that carries them. But anyway, what I did was I put about 1 inch of peat moss perlite mix in the bottom. What I'm going to do is I'll water these in good. If there's some extra water, it'll go into the bottom. It's just set up humidity in here. Now, This is going to sit in here on my workbench. I have it on a heat pad, and I've got it set at 77 degrees, and it's beginning to warm it up. I just put the sensor down in the very bottom because I don't want to warm it up to 77 degrees all the way up through here. I just want to make sure it's warmer towards the lower part of the cuttings, and at that rate it'll keep them warm enough that they should try to root before they start trying to set any leaves. So we'll see how that goes. I put my apples in here with my figs that I had planted, and I have some more figs coming later this week. I have another tote, and when the time comes, I'll just move these apples and the other apples that are still waiting to be potted up over. But anyway, I hope you find some value in this video. You know, it's not too hard to root figs, especially apples. Now that's going to take a little bit longer, but this is the best way to get some fruit. And like I say, you never know how well it's going to do. I have a Honeycrisp apple tree that I had just taken about a half a dozen cuttings. When I cut pruned up the tree, I stuck half a dozen cuttings in the ground, and one of them rooted in, and I didn't pay any attention to it. And by the time I caught it this year and moved it, I don't know, it's up at least 10 foot tall, maybe even closer to 12 foot tall after a couple years of growth. So it's not that hard. Just give it a try. And if you're not a subscriber, well, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell button, and of course give it a thumbs up. Happy gardening.